Good morning. It is Monday, April 15th, 2024. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Before I get into the story that everyone's talking about and everyone's thinking about, I'd like to just give a little report on my experience watching a total eclipse of the sun. It was worth it, the long trip and the even longer trip back with all the traffic from all over where I was. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I was very glad to be able to do it in this lifetime. I would recommend everybody who has a chance to see a total eclipse of the sun to take advantage of the situation. It was mesmerizing. I found it like being in a science fiction movie when you take into account everything, and all the superstitious stuff that went on ahead of time didn't come to pass. Except where I was, somebody decided to set off a Civil War cannon a couple of times. It was rather unnerving, but it was something really cool. Anyways, the story on everyone's mind, though, is, of course, the Iranian attack on Israel. In retaliation for the April Fool's Day attack on its consulate in Damascus, Syria, and there's reports that it is a consulate or wasn't a consulate. I believe, though, by international standards it was, since it was occupied with diplomats. Anyways, Iran struck back at Israel over the weekend directly with what is being reported as hundreds of drones and missiles, and some of these were pretty sophisticated missiles based on what we saw that was recorded and sent out on the net. There's still very little in the way of hard data on what damage was inflicted, which is not usually the case in such circumstances. The Israelis are only saying a few people were hit by debris falling out of the sky, but it would seem unlikely that was the extent of the casualties. The reports from Israel that 99% of the drones and missiles were destroyed before getting to their targets also seems a little far-fetched. The Americans were said to have intervened with quote-unquote U.S. forces, but no details were forthcoming. The British were supposedly involved. And the Jordanians, the Jordanian Air Force apparently had its hand in stopping these drones and missiles from reaching Israel, which I don't think is going to go over too well with the population of that country, and that will be something to watch in the very near future. Now, as I record this report, Israel has not yet retaliated, and some observers don't believe they will, at least immediately. We will see. If Israel does decide to escalate the situation, Iranian officials have said that the response would be 10 times of what it was initially. And if you do the math, that would mean upwards of 1,000 missiles being launched on that tiny little country, not much bigger than the U.S. state of Connecticut. That would not be good, especially for the Israelis, but what we're seeing is efforts by several sides to pull in big players, namely the United States and possibly Russia. No matter what happens, Iran has pretty much won. Let me explain that. At both the military and political level, they played this thing out brilliantly. No matter what you think of the Iranian regime, and I myself don't think much of them at all, one has to give credit where credit is due. They were able to test their weaponry, which has proven to be quite sophisticated, on real live targets. They were able to strike back at Israel as a sovereign country in an effective way that has not been seen probably since Israel was founded. And they have basically communicated to the United States and Israel they're not afraid for a fight. They've won all sorts of fans in the Middle East. There were a lot of videos of people celebrating in just about every capital in the Middle East. And they also played it up politically very well. They only hit military targets, that's what we're being told, and if that wasn't the case, I'm sure the Israelis would have had that all over the news. They hit a couple of air bases and anti-aircraft positions in the Golan Heights, ostensibly because those were the bases that the attack on their consulate in Damascus was launched from. They also made complaints to the United Nations. They quoted UN law, the right of self-defense, etc., etc. They played this well. They also showed what could be viewed as restraint. They didn't just go in and madly drop bombs on everybody. They were very surgical about it. And at the end of it, they said, that's it. We consider the matter closed, which was a stroke of political brilliance right there, which puts the ball in Israel's court right now. So it's up to Israel to move this thing along. The Israelis have, for many, many years, been able to hit other countries whenever it felt like it, for several reasons, but among them that they thought the United States would back them up. Now, even though the U.S. said they wouldn't get involved by intercepting drones and missiles heading towards Israel, they already have. There are an awful lot of various political factions here in the United States are pushing for a war with Iran. And it's not a war the U.S. is in a position to fight, let alone win. I don't think the people in Washington that are looking at this really understand what's going on here, because nobody's scared of the U.S. anymore. The U.S. is not top dog anymore. And all those bases throughout the Middle East are, in most cases, inert. Because when Kuwait and Qatar says that American forces based in their countries cannot be used to attack Iran, they effectively become useless. So the chess game is coming to an interesting conclusion right now, and it does not look good for the U.S. or Israel unless there's a scale back and people start thinking and behaving differently. Now, for those of you who think the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran is made up of nice guys, I would ask you very strongly to get a reality check. They are not. They are a ruthless regime. They have been very oppressive to their own people, which is one of the reasons they really like to have an enemy like Israel. As I've pointed out many times, the people in the Middle East really don't give a damn about the Palestinians, but they use them as an excuse to keep the hatred going in their own countries, because when a country has a common enemy, it's easier to control the population. This is the same government that brutalizes women and have been known for putting them to death for not wearing a headscarf. They hang people with construction cranes. They're not nice. And they have been involved in acts of terrorism around the world. What was wrong about this whole situation is giving them an excuse. And also underestimating them, because this is not a country that is stupid, at least in terms of military capability. They're very well organized, they're populated, they're motivated, and they have strong allies. The U.S. gets into a tangle there, it will not win. And Israel has a lot more to lose than I think that the average Israeli even realizes at this point. Now, what to look out for? Jordan. The king of Jordan, and this is a part of the world where people are kind of sick of monarchs, actually ordered his air force to stop missiles and drones heading over his territory. Now, of course, if drones and missiles are heading over your country, you do have every right, and indeed somewhat of an obligation, to shoot them down, even if they're going to some other country. But most people in the Middle East aren't going to see it that way, nor will the 1 million displaced Palestinians living in Jordan going to see it that way. So look for something to happen there politically, probably violently in the not-too-distant future. Lebanon, of course, Hezbollah was part of this. That was coordinated. They were launching quite a few rockets themselves. The ones you're not hearing about are Turkey, which is also a country that is actually has a claim to Palestine and Lebanon because it used to be part of the Ottoman Empire. We'll see how they do. But this has changed the dynamic completely. The U.S. is not the top dog anymore. And Israel is only been able to get away with what it's been getting away with because it believed that the U.S. would come to its aid no matter what. That's not 1,000% anymore. And even if it was, the U.S. is not in a capability of helping them as much as was once the case. Now, what I'd like to know is, where did these American quote-unquote forces come from? What were they? Were they ships offshore shooting missiles? Were they airplanes that came off of aircraft carriers? Everything is still shrouded in mystery about this one. And it will be interesting to see what actually happened once it's reported. One thing I did see is a few videos of missiles hitting Israel, and at the last second they make a swerve. And that, I understand from some sources, is a sign of very sophisticated missile technology that will correct its course and hit something very precisely. Now, by the time this gets out there and some of you hear things, Israel could be retaliating. What they'll be retaliating with, I don't know, because Iran has hypersonic missiles and there's no indication Israel is armed such. But we will see. We will see. Now, one more thing before I go on to another topic here that is related, but a lot of people are saying, oh, this is a nothing burger. It's not going to turn into a big World War III. Well, not necessarily. Here's why. World War II began on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler's forces moved into Poland and Stalin's forces moved into Poland, although Hitler was the only one that Britain and France declared war on. That's another matter for history to look at, too. But after the move into Poland, there was something called the Phony War, which lasted about 8 months. And that's where very little happened. So Britain and France declared war on Germany, and everyone started kind of jockeying. There was very real little shooting that went on between the two sides, so they called it the Phony War. It was a long lull. And that all ended when German forces did an end run around the Maginot Line in France through Belgium and the Netherlands and proceeded to kick the tail of the British and French forces and move them to Dunkirk, etc., etc. We could be in that situation right now. We could be in that situation where a lot of the major players, and that includes Russia, Iran, several countries in the Middle East, the United States, possibly Britain, other places, and of course NATO, because we still have the Ukrainian situation to deal with. Everyone could be basically getting ready for something. So we could be entering a period of the phony war, but that does not mean a war has not really started. I believe it has, because Israel, if it keeps to its pattern, is going to retaliate in some way. It could be clandestine. It could be direct. No inside information there. Now, the one thing I do wish to advise people on very strongly is if there's ever a time in history for there to be false flags, in other words, staged acts of military attack or violence, something like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, it would be now. Because there are too many forces in the United States that want to see a war on behalf of Israel for Iran. Now, one other thing that's going on right now is there's a convergence of what are called Zionist Christian fundamentalist leaders that are moving to Washington on airplanes right now to meet with members of Congress. That's come from several news sources. And they're going to go there to lobby helping Israel militarily. Most of these are very older men who really don't know what century we're in or the current state of our armed forces. So we basically have fundamentalist Islam, Zionist Judaism, and fundamentalist Zionist Christianity all converging to make one hell of a mess for the rest of us. And this is a war of religious fanaticism. It's not practical. It certainly isn't to help the Palestinians. This is not how you do that. But these are people that believe that we're in biblical times and that Jesus or somebody is on its way back, and such belief systems can get us all killed. So, as I always tell people, if you're into praying, don't pray for peace, pray for rational thought, because then peace would follow. I would advise people, though, to be very wary of what comes out in the mainstream media and in what is known as the alternative media, because much of that is just basically operating on rumors or things that are picked up from strange sources all over the internet. I have been following some news sources from the Middle East that are at least official, and we will see what happens there. When these sorts of things go, they have a way of going out of control. So be safe and be vigilant. Something else we've seen in the last few hours that seems to be turning the worm in Australia is an Orthodox priest who was very popular. In fact, had a very large internet following. He was stabbed while holding Mass in Sydney, Australia, and it was captured on a live feed and has been rebroadcast all over the net. The culprit appears to be an Arab. He was speaking Arabic in some of the video I saw. There's no word on the priest's condition at this point, but others were also stabbed and some are reported to be in very serious condition. What is significant about this is a near riot that occurred outside the church where there were Christians from all over that came and started screaming for blood, which is understandable, but might be what the person who started this act of terror probably wanted. But I would look very carefully at what's going on in Australia. I would also look for the blowback that's going to be occurring in England. Scotland has a new anti-hate speech law, which is quite insane. You're going to be seeing a rebellion to all the multicultural liberal agenda that has proven to be such a miserable failure and has caused nothing but pain and agony for the most part for all parties concerned. That's it for today. This is a longer report than usual, but given the circumstances, I think that's what was needed. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, consider a paid subscription or a donation, and share with your friends. If you want to reach me, I can be reached on what used to be called Twitter, is now called X, and my handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. I can also be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That is feedback@aureliancolumn.com. Until next time, be good, be safe, be very vigilant, and good day.